Hello, everyone. I'm Cheryl Pop. Welcome to Sausalito Books by the Bay, where we are broadcasting live here on the Sausalito waterfront. Welcome and thank you for joining us for what I call our happy hour virtual event series. So I hope everyone has their beverage of choice. We have a delightful program for you this evening and a very special guest. And before I introduce her, I want to go over some basic Zoom protocols. This is a webinar, so we don't see you. You can see us, we don't see you, and you're all muted. That doesn't mean you can't participate. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see there's a place for Q&A as well as for chat. So I would encourage you to type any messages, comments, or questions you have in there. And after our conversation and Lucinda does some reading, we will go to Q&A. And I know that there is a vice presidential debate this evening, which starts at 6, but I don't think that we're going to go too much beyond that. So I hope you stay with us, and that'll get recorded. You can catch up with that later. And we will also be sending you a video link to this presentation as well. So thank you all for joining us. It's my great pleasure to introduce Lucinda Watson, who lives here in Sausalito. She and her dog Harry come into the bookstore all the time. She's a wonderful person, and we're so delighted to be hosting her for the debut of her very first book of poetry. She has written much in the past and been published in many literary journals, but this is her first book of poetry. For those of you who know her, she is very active in her communities, very supportive. She's taught for many years. She was at the Haas School of Business teaching for many years. She has 2 master degrees, including one in writing. So she's very, very accomplished, and we're very excited about her new book. It is called The Favorite, and I've read it 2 or 3 times now. It is, and I'm not even a poetry person. I love this. It is one of the most captivating books because it's also somewhat of a memoir, and I'm going to let her tell you about it, but it's in 3 chronological sections, sort of starting with her childhood and going into later in life. So we're really honored to have you with us this evening, Lucinda. Thank you for joining us. Why don't you start with telling our viewers what inspired you to write this?
Well, first of all, thank you, Cheryl, for hosting me. I just am so excited. This is my first event, and I'm really thrilled that you arranged this for me and very grateful. And I also wanted to mention that Cheryl has had her wonderful bookstore for just over a year. Is that right? And she's kept it.
Will be our 1-year anniversary.
Okay, so, and she's kept it open during this difficult time for all of us in Sausalito, and I just really appreciate that. I appreciate independent booksellers, and thank you so much for persevering. It's great. And I also want to thank I sound like I'm getting an Oscar. Sorry. I also want to thank my family and friends and other poets who supported me. You know, why did I write this book? This book is a collection of poems that I started writing poetry when I was probably 13. And Cheryl and I were talking yesterday, and she asked me a question about family. And I said, just never ask for a poet in your family. Never ask for one of your children to be a poet, because your life will be a living hell. You'll have this person who will constantly analyze, use what you say in her poems, criticize you subtly, and then all under the guise of saying it's from my work. So I started to write poetry because I couldn't not write poetry. And also I'm lazy, and I tried to write fiction and that just wasn't working because it took so much more time and organization. But to me, a poem is like a little snippet of an idea or a piece of music or, you hear a conversation from two total strangers and one phrase sticks in your mind, and then you have to write about it because it just reminds you of something that you need to say. And I think what we're all looking for, especially today, is for some kind of solace or inspiration or something that's going to make us feel that there's a collective consciousness between us so that we don't feel so alone. And poetry for me, the first time I got a poem published, I was just like blown away. I thought, oh my God, someone really likes my work. They understand. It was so gratifying. And so I guess, I started in publishing, and my first poem was called Interviewing, and that I published, and that was like 2004. So it's been 16 years of collecting poems and sending them out. And if I showed you the computer printout of how many rejections I got versus how many times people accepted them, you have to be persevering about it. But I can't not write. It's what helps me. If I didn't have this wonderful outlet, I don't know what I would do. I wouldn't have survived as well. So
There is a sense in this book when you read the poems, because it is so much about your childhood, your life, the different periods in your life, that it was maybe somehow cathartic. And I mean, some of them are pretty wrenching tales. Which is why I like them, because they're very provocative and evocative. How would you describe this book to someone? If someone said, well, this is your first book of poetry, how would you describe it?
oh, that's a good question. That's a trick question. Well, I once remember.
Right or wrong answer. Yeah.
No.
But it's kind of like, maybe it's better to say, what did you hope to accomplish with this? I mean, if you were telling someone, well, this is my first book and I need to say, this is kind of what it's about, what would you do? What would you say?
I think what I would say is there are many other people in the world that are like me, that are introverts, that feel alone, that often feel misunderstood, that sometimes feel hopeless, especially now, feel depressed. So I guess I wrote this book because I think there's a huge sense of hope about it. You have to learn to look at what's in your past and think, that was kind of interesting and somewhat unusual, but it was also really funny looking back. And, to me, that's what gets you through the night. And I also have been lucky enough in my life through my work and through my friends to have a lot of younger friends, younger women friends. So I think in a way I wrote the book for them because I want them to feel and to know that, life gets better. You understand things. And, frankly, the most interesting people I know are the ones that did struggle in life. The people, like there was a girl in my elementary school named Betty Webster, and I know she's not listening. She can't be, but she was so perfect. And she was always dressed perfectly, and she was like field hockey captain and all of these things. And the boys loved her. I was never going to be a Betty Webster. Somehow I, was not that coordinated as a kid. And, my parents did the best they could, but, there were 6 kids in our house. So we didn't all have brand spanking new clothes every day and whatever. And it's just really interesting to see that if you know that as a child, if you watch other people, you become an observer of human nature, then you become a predictor. So it makes your environment more safe. And then you write about it and other people say, well, yeah. I mean, the interviewing poem was so great for me because there were all these single women that wrote to me and they're like, yeah, I have caller ID and a silver Amex card too, and thong underwear, and I'm not getting anywhere either. So it's pretty funny. It's anyway. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's why I wrote the book. I couldn't not write the book.
And you had, because of your sort of unique life's, your unique upbringing and your family, you had a lot of opportunities and experiences and exposure, like meeting President Kennedy, that the average person wouldn't have. And I think the way you portray those experiences in here is so very candid and very raw, but also very, there is definitely a lot of humor laced through all of this. And the story about having to be naked in the backseat of the car, even though your brother could keep his clothes on, but the girls couldn't wear anything till they got to grandmother's house because the dresses would get wrinkled. And I mean, those are just all really rich memories from your past, I think, that are, it's really a delight to read about them. I mean, even though some of it's, you can see that there's anger or sadness, or there's some, there was some angst, or that maybe not a happy ending, but they're really like little vignettes. Every poem is like this little vignette to me.
Oh, thank you. One thing I think you have to be careful of with poetry, and I say this to my friends because they'll read a poem I've posted or just written, and they'll say, "Oh my God, that poem you wrote was just like so amazing. And then you did this, and then you did that." But, if you're a poet, we weren't sorry, I shouldn't tell you this, but we weren't really naked in the back seat. We had little slips on, but that doesn't make a good poem. You feel like you're naked. You're sitting in your
near naked counts. Near naked counts.
near naked counts. But people, it's like people think that you're really writing verbatim what happened, but that's why poetry saves you, because something happens, but in your mind, it becomes something else. It becomes you're naked and, there's your brother. I don't even know if my brother was in the car, but the whole story, I just.
Literary license,
Yes, yes, exactly. And I think it's, I also think there's a real need for nostalgia now in the world. I think people want to go back to the 50s. Let's face it, we had a fabulous childhood. Things were easy. Our parents, were happy for the most part. School was this or that, and we didn't really have to struggle. These young kids today, it's just a nightmare what they're going through, with COVID and homeschooling, and then out in California, the fire and the world, and, our political situation. It's really hard, I think, for families today. It just kind of breaks my heart.
It was a simpler time, and I think
yeah,
roles were more defined, for better or for worse.
yeah.
It was a simpler time in some ways. It really was. But you captured that, I think. Talk to us a little bit, Lucinda, about your writing habit. Do you write every day?
I don't do anything every day. I hate monotony and schedule.
Okay, so it's very spontaneous. It's when you feel like it. It's not just when there's a full moon and you've had a glass of wine and the light is right.
No, but what I have noticed, like, for example, a few years ago, I was in Maine, and this flock of birds flew across the sky, and I didn't realize that's called murmuration. And I thought, someone said to me, murmuration, that's a murmuration. I thought, oh my God, that's so beautiful. So that became a poem. So if I see something like that, or I hear something from someone else, or notice something, now I have this great contraption called an iPhone. So I write down in the iPhone, or I talk whatever I've noticed, and then later I'll turn it into something. I have a list of things that I'll turn it into. Or even a photo that you take, you could turn into a poem. But I'm jealous of my poet friends who get up every morning and work like that. I feel slothful and disgusting that I don't, but I can't. I like in the morning to meditate and slowly get into the day. And if I had to write at that time, I think it would be, you raise a family, you have a schedule, you go to work, you have a schedule, then you get to be 70 and you can sort of do what you want. It's really marvelous. So,
You've done a good job, regardless of what your style or discipline may be. Why don't you read some of your poems to us? I think everyone
okay,
would love to hear a selection, and then we'll do some
okay.
Q&A. I know I have some other questions as well. I'm going to make you the big featured person here. Okay.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, there you go.
I know. All right. So I'm going to start out reading the poem that you discussed, which is called Road Trip. And I've already explained how the poem came about, but one of my biggest memories as a child was going on the Merritt Parkway, which was quite a wonderful and still exists. It's a wonderful road. It takes you everywhere. And when I was a kid, I used to dream about flying. And because I was such a practical child, I would take the Merritt Parkway to go places in my dream. So here is Road Trip. We're all naked in the back seat of a 1957 Plymouth station wagon in late June in Connecticut. The sticky, shiny plastic has cracks that bite us. My mother says it's 87 and counting, and no one is saying a word. White dresses are layered like doll clothes across the way back, and I can hear them crackle against each other as we do at home. We are all too hot, but Mom says, sit still, as she drives, her flamingo skirt fanned around her, the wagon slithering like a snake up the Merritt Parkway. We are visiting grandfather, and since we're never clean enough, we'll be hauled out at a rest stop to be straitjacketed into dresses, and our mother's hope for acceptance after 9 years, 6 children, 5 daughters, and 1 son who rides shotgun and wears what he wants. So this is another poem that I wrote from a memory that actually did happen, but it was so funny to me that it happened. In retrospect, I had to write a poem about it. So it's called Who Put the Tiffany Paper in the Rat's Cage? A crime has been discovered on this Saturday morning. My mother's perfectly blue like a Maine sky stationery from Tiffany's has been used to line the rat's cage. It's pretty clear who did this, but we're lined up anyway. In the front hall, underneath the curving gallows of stairs, we 6 stand, not unlike the condemned in a holding pen. We know we're all condemned no matter how this plays out. My father stands in front of our lineup. One of you has committed a crime and is lying about it. Until that person steps forward, no one will leave this house. We all know who has done this, but my mother is standing behind my father making hand signals of don't tell, no matter what. I feel like falsely confessing, just so I can go to Betsy Beecher's house. Her father is never home, and her mother thinks I am interesting. So I really like this poem. I wrote it a couple of years ago. Again, it's a childhood memory, but I think in the 50s, we all had really special magical time outside and to be free that kids today maybe don't often get that opportunity. But we had a pond behind our house, and it was my personal favorite place to be. So I wrote this poem called Across the Pond. I used to take the old red canoe after school before my brother got to it and find freedom on the pond, though it was covered in algae and fingers of weeds that grabbed you from under. Out I would go, a silent paddler learned at midnight when humans slept, dipping into the dark water with a perfect arc of stroke, a sliver of silver, a flash of speed. Pocahontas with no braids, paddling to the island, floating on the lake with birch trees like antennas, Poking up to the sky, I was invisible. The canoe always found its shelf under trees who bent down to cover me, and my hand took the frayed gray rope held before by prior escapees and wrapped a bowline around the harsh white and black of the bark on the tree trunk. I was safe. Utterly still on the verdant moss, velvet skin to caress, lying back softly, my hair was green, my hands were green, the camouflage was working. It always worked. No one could find me here. The birches were wrapped in paper bark with messages underneath like ancient Greek tablets only I could translate, and sometimes it took all afternoon. I was a stubborn child, and waiting was my middle name. Small and large ants crisscrossed my bony ankles like feathers against skin. A snake came and went. There was a bird call. The island was so still, nothing could move it off its anchor. I learned everything I know from that bark. So I'm going to read one more from this section and then maybe a couple of others, but this is one of my favorites. We had a front hall closet in our house. I'm sure some of you did too, but no one was allowed to put their things in the closet except the dad when he came home from work, right? Hat, men still wore hats, overcoats. This was New England. So this is our front hall. Our front hall had a very tall grandfather clock at the foot of the stairs, keeping watch over the household. No one could wind it but my father, and the clock defined the nights in regular chimes reaching everyone's ears in everyone's bedroom. There was a front hall table made of lustrous mahogany where mail and packages were placed daily. The legs of the table looked like a young girl with 4 legs curtsying all at once. I know because I spent a lot of time under there waiting for God knows what. My favorite part, however, in this wonderful area of our house was the front hall closet, which no one could put anything in except for my father. It was his personal closet for his overcoat and his hats and his umbrellas and his galoshes. I don't remember hearing we weren't supposed to go in that closet, so I went in that closet quite a bit. There was a shelf that hats were on that had a thumbtacked piece of decorative ribbon that was ruched, something I had never seen before. I often took delight in pulling a piece of it off and seeing what it felt like. My father had 4 or 5 coats in there, and most of the coats were some range of the color gray. There were cashmere coats and wool coats and cotton coats and canvas coats. The coats had a big life and seemed to go out a lot. Sometimes alone and sometimes in pairs, the coats went out in the world, across oceans and in airplanes, office buildings and houses, not ours, down inside boats, outside on sidewalks. They always came back home slightly different from when they left. I know this because when I went into the closet, I would stand up inside each coat, starting with my head going into the bottom because they were buttoned up, you see, and I would shimmy myself up to usually just the lowest button because my father was very tall and I was still short. I would stand there and breathe in the outside world, imagining where he had been and who he had seen, and the smell of Old Spice would anesthetize me against the real world. In the closet, I created whatever I wanted for hours. No one ever looked for me. I stood so still inside a coat, I became a part of its life. So now I know we're running, we're at 6 o'clock. So what do you think? How many more poems, Cheryl?
Oh, let me get back here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, why don't you do 2 more? Yeah, do 2
Okay.
more. Do 2 more.
Okay, so in that case, I didn't have it marked, but I'm going to read I'm going to read Murmuration because it's so beautiful. And then I'm going to read, okay, I'm going to read two. Okay, this poem is called I Found Her Lost Again, and I wrote it in Maine a couple of summers ago. And the picture in the book, which I don't know, you can see, is of my friend Lucinda. Her name is also Lucinda. So funny. Sitting on the pink plastic swan. It's called I Found Her Lost Again. In the dusky, damp hour of summer when wine is poured and in the distance neighbors bicker over their barbecue, the husband saying it's not his job to clean it and clattering the domed lid over 5 pounds of grade A beef, the wisteria desperately holding itself open to possibility, and the dogs roam barking, their tongues sloppy with grass. The birds, repeaters, warble from tree to tree, trying to vary their story back and forth, so bored with each other. In the yard, a pool filled with azure water, an aquarium of tears, piss, semen, a pure rectangle, a holding pond of life. There, lying on the surface, on the great pink plasticized inflatable swan, floating unguarded, there's a girl. She could be 19 or 70. She's listening to the opera of summer, writing a bird libretto, her fingers holding the minute hand on the clock of time, suspended by the undercurrent of oboe. She knows she's different. She feels every rhythm. So, all right, I'm going to do something I said I wasn't going to do. So, and then you're going to be mad at me, but I don't think you really will. They're short. Okay. Murmuration. A rare gathering of starlings that look like dancing clouds passed over my head this morning like a shiver in a graveyard. Murmuration. The sky darkened, my dogs slowed their pace, and I still struggled to hold up the dike against the flood of winter. My mind pushed back the chill of late fall, back against the solitude coming, the harsh quiet of the snow. As long as I'm moving, I can't remember you. But in winter, the mind releases its starlings, and there you are suddenly in all your glossy magnificence, and here am I alone. But now, on a final note, I have to wear my prop. Okay. Adoption. I remember when I was young and beautiful, but at the time I thought I was fat and boring. Maybe my mirrors were bad or my stigmatism was uncorrected. Now I think I'm bewildered about what I did in my life and why I stayed where I stayed. So I've written to the British royal family and asked them to consider adopting me. I think I would be a good addition as I really know how to dress and I have beautiful table manners and I feel really comfortable with a strict schedule. I would know instinctively how to back out of a room and how to occupy myself in the daytime hours. I would certainly never embarrass anyone, and I like the idea of knowing what was going to happen for the next 7,000 days. I love dogs, so I would fit right in. I look good in riding clothes, even though I'm 70, but the horse always knows I'm afraid of him. I don't think it's a lot to ask of the royal family because they need help and so do I. It's a very equitable solution for all. I don't need a title, though I would like a crown. I like the idea of living in a house with many other people who have no idea how many people are actually living in the house. It's the idea of all those bodies that brings comfort and the prescribed nature of life, which is soothing. There I go.
Oh, thank you so much, Lucinda. You know, this just reminds me of how much I miss like live events where authors are reading and we can have poetry readings. That was wonderful. And the last one is
You.
one of my favorites. I think that
Me too. I wish they would adopt
I think
me.
the Palace should adopt me. Yeah, it's great.
I
It's
know.
wonderful.
Thank
I've
you.
always been a monarchist. So thank you so much for that. It
You're
was wonderful.
welcome.
So let's see, we've got some, okay, one question. Which is your favorite poem and why?
I think my favorite poem, um, it depends on the year. I just wrote a poem called Lust, which isn't in the book, but hopefully will be in my next book. And I find that hysterical. You can read it on my blog. Um, and I love the poem that is in the book, Interviewing, because as I say, it's, I think, the first I got published. And it is a funny poem about being a single woman.
Okay. Um, Lots of people are saying they can't wait to read the book. And Michelle asks, do the poems go in chronological order in terms of the autobiographical parts, or how is it organized? And what ages or periods provided the most inspiration? And which ones do you recall most vividly?
Boy, I think that I'm like the history person of our family, because I recall almost every detail of everything that we did. And my wonderful sisters who have put up with so much with me, constantly saying, well, remember when this happened or that happened? Um, so I think my childhood has to have provided the most material, because that's what one's childhood does. You know, if you have if you're an intelligent person and you self-reflect at all, there are things in your childhood you just don't understand, and they stay with you. And so writing about them or talking about them is very helpful, I think, because strangely enough, when I was a kid and now, I always feel as if the most important thing in life is to become a better person. And that probably sounds really corny, but it's really how I felt. Like, I just become, if I understand this, I'll be more patient, more loving, more thoughtful in the world. And I think it's important. I'm always surprised when people say they haven't felt like that, because that was like some innate thing in me. I think it's a good thing.
Okay. CG asks, if you don't write every day, are there times of the day or night that work best? A room you like best when you actually sit down to do a poem that you write down, rewrite, polish, and declare done?
Um, you know
The
what's so weird?
times of day and rooms.
I can't even, I don't think there is any such thing. I noticed that for me, I prefer to type out my poems rather than write them in longhand. And every single poetry teacher I ever had, none of them did that. All of them wrote things out in longhand. But for me, and this is going to sound weird, I feel like I'm channeling some person. If I'm typing it, it's not coming right from me. If I'm channeling it, it's coming from my subconscious. So it's going to be better. Sometimes, because I'm a talker, I dictate my poems and then I go back and, rewrite them and shape them again so that they'll be, understandable. But that's probably shocking to most poets, but it works well for me.
Good, thank you. I think that we got most of the questions. There have been a lot of comments about how people love your work. Um, Diana said they love the front door. Um, let's see. Oh, all kinds of, oh, here's another one. Diagnosis was one of the ones that knock somebody out because you captured the moment. And just lots of compliments from obviously friends and fans. So
Thank you.
I guess
That's so
I have a
sweet.
couple last questions. One of them is, are you working on another book of poetry?
Yeah, I certainly, yes. And, my poems are really different now because I find the world so troubling. And I keep thinking, what can I write that will help people during this time? Because I think we need humor, and I think we need hope, and just I think we need to be positive. Like sometimes I'm very lighthearted and it annoys certain people, but I just refuse to look back. You know, I've had some certain tragedies in my life, and I can't dwell on them, because what we need right now is something positive moving forward. We have to believe, and staying in the moment and just reflecting on how lucky we are in so many ways. We live in a beautiful spot, as you know. And, you know, I mean, I've forgotten what the question was.
It doesn't matter.
No.
You gave a brilliant response. I asked if you were working on something else, writing another book. And the answer was yes, yes.
The answer was yes.
For sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Julia says she thanks you for being brave enough to share your experiences in such a beautiful and unique way. And I think maybe that's a good thing for me to close on as well. It's very brave, I think, writing of any sort, you're really bearing your soul. But I think particularly in something like this, poetry, which is also somewhat of a memoir, and I guess just I think everyone will figure this out when they read this, but the favorite is in reference to you were your father's favorite, right?
Yes, for
You
a
want to say
time.
a few lines about that?
Yeah, I will. But one thing, because I know we are closing, I'm very neglectful, because you and I spoke about this in our first talk. For people who are wanting to publish their work, I have to tell you, I really lucked out, because I sent out my manuscript to, I think, 21 different places. But in the end, I sent it to Betsy and Neil Delmonico at Golden Antelope Press. And Betsy wrote me a letter, the likes of which I've never received in my whole life. It was so beautiful. And she appreciated my work so much. So I'm so grateful. It's just so lucky when you find a place. So I just think people should keep trying. Don't give up. I was sending this out for 4 years, I think, and it's so important. And back to being the favorite, you know, being the favorite is good for a period of time, but it's also has a lot of consequences. And I think those consequences are what make people better at understanding what's happening in life. Because everybody thinks, oh yeah, being the favorite is the best position in the world, but actually it's probably the most difficult, especially in a big family. So life is about learning, you know, and I'm very grateful, like, for you, because this was fun.
Well, thank you for so many words of wisdom, Lucinda. And I want to thank all of you who joined us. Really special thanks to Lucinda. You did a wonderful job. And of
Oh,
course, we
thanks.
have her book. And if you would like it signed or personalized, we can arrange for that. You can call us, you can stop by the shop. We are open 7 days a week, and we observe all the pandemic protocols, sanitizing your hands and social distancing and masks. But we are here, we are open. We have her books, and I know she'd be delighted to personalize or sign one for you. And it really is a wonderful, I want to go home and read it again now.
Oh,
So,
you're so sweet.
no, I'm sincere. It's so
Thank
great. So
you.
thank you, everyone from
Thank
Sausalito Books
you.
by the Bay. And thank you so much, Lucinda. I can't wait for you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.